November 4th, 1274. Komoda Beach. Look at the horizon. It is cold. The wind coming off the Korea Strait doesn't just blow, it bites. It carries the scent of salt, wet sand, and something else. Something heavy. On the shore, there are 80 men. Just 80. They are samurai, the elite warriors of Japan. They have spent their entire lives training for this moment. They have mastered the bow. They have perfected the blade. But as they stand on that gray sand, their training feels small. Their history feels quiet. Because the horizon is no longer empty. At the front stands a man named Sō Sukekuni. He is 67 years old. Think about that. At an age where most men in the 13th century were long dead or resting by a fire, Sukekuni is wearing 30 pounds of iron and silk. He has been the deputy governor of Tsushima for 12 years. He has seen seasons change, children grow, and the tide go in and out. He knows every rock on this beach. He knows every family in the villages behind him. Farmers, fishermen, people who don't know how to kill, people who believe the sea is their protector. They are wrong. The sun begins to rise, but it doesn't bring light. It brings a nightmare. First, you see one mast, then 10, then 50. Then, the entire horizon simply disappears. It is replaced by wood, sail, and iron. 900 ships. Take a breath and try to visualize that. 900 vessels, packed so tight you can't see the water between them. It looks like a floating city made of wood. It looks like a forest growing out of the ocean. This is the largest invasion fleet in the history of the world at this point. This isn't a raid. This isn't a border dispute. This is the Mongol Empire. On those decks are 30,000 soldiers. Mongols who have ridden across the steppes of Central Asia. Koreans who have been forced into service. Chinese engineers who know the secrets of fire. These men have already conquered half of the known world. They have burned cities in Poland. They have crushed Baghdad. They have ended dynasties in China. To them, Tsushima is not a country. It is a pebble, a small, insignificant rock in the middle of the sea that needs to be stepped on. Now, look back at the beach. 80 samurai. The math is impossible. It is one man against nearly 400. It is a drop of water against a tidal wave. Sukekuni knows this. He isn't a fool. He sees the flags. He hears the low, rhythmic beat of the drums echoing across the water. It is a sound that vibrates in your teeth. It is the sound of an empire coming to collect a debt. Sukekuni does what a samurai is supposed to do. He follows protocol. He sends a small boat with 4 men. They row out into the cold gray water. They aren't going to fight. Not yet. They are going to ask a question. They are going to follow the rules of civilized warfare. They want to know who is in charge and what they want. The boat gets closer. The samurai look up at the massive wooden walls of the first Mongol ship. They wait for a voice. They wait for a challenge. They get an answer, but it isn't a voice. The sky above the Mongol ship turns black. For a split second, it looks like a cloud. Then, the sound hits. A hiss. A whistle. Thousands of arrows rain down at once. The samurai in the boat don't even have time to draw their swords. They don't have time to scream. 2 are dead before their oars hit the water. The others try to turn back, but the arrows are thick like rain. 1 man collapses, a shaft through his throat, his blood staining the salt water of the bay. The rules are gone. The standard protocol is dead. The Mongols don't care about your names. They don't care about your honor. They are 30,000, and you are 80, and they are coming ashore. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. To understand why 80 men are about to die on a cold beach, you have to look away from the ocean. You have to look back. Not days, but years. You have to look at the man sitting on a throne thousands of miles away. Kublai Khan. By 1274, this man wasn't just a king. He was the center of the world. He was the grandson of Genghis Khan, and he had inherited a hunger that couldn't be satisfied. His empire was a monster. 12 million square miles. It stretched from the forests of Poland to the shores of Korea, from the frozen wastes of Siberia to the burning sands of Syria. 1/4 of the entire earth was under the hooves of his cavalry. Imagine the power. Kublai's messengers were so fast, so organized, that they had stations every 25 miles just to swap horses. A letter could travel across a continent while the ink was still fresh. He controlled China. He controlled Korea. He controlled the silk, the gold, and the steel of half the planet. And then, he looked at Japan. It wasn't that Japan was a threat. It wasn't that they had gold he needed. It was simpler than that. It was ego. In 1266, Kublai sent diplomats. They carried a letter. The message was short: submit. Become a vassal state. Send us your money, acknowledge my supremacy, or face the consequences. Now, think about the Japanese side. The Kamakura shogunate. These weren't politicians, they were warriors. Led by a young man named Hojo Tokimune, they looked at this letter from a barbarian king and felt one thing: insult. In the world of the samurai, honor is more than a word. It is the air you breathe. You don't bow to someone you don't respect. Japan's response: silence. Absolute, deafening silence. They didn't even bother to write back. Imagine being the most powerful man on earth and being left on reed by a small island nation. Kublai sent more envoys in 1268. Again, silence. He sent them again in 1271. This time, the samurai met them at the shore. They didn't offer tea. They offered steel. They placed the Mongols under military custody, refused them an audience with the leaders, and told them to go home and never come back. One diplomat, Zhao Liangbai, waited for 2 years. 2 years for a single word. It never came. When he finally returned to China in 1273, he was shaking with rage. He told Kublai that the Japanese were manless barbarians. He said they weren't worth the effort. Kublai disagreed. Silence is a message. To Kublai Khan, silence was a challenge. It was a scream of defiance. And in his world, defiance was a death sentence. In April 1274, he gave the order: build the ships, gather the men. If they will not bow, they will break. While the Mongols were building 900 ships in Korea, Japan was praying. Across the country, shrines and temples were filled with the sound of chanting. The government told the people to pray for the repulsion of foreign troops. They built watchtowers. They mobilized local lords. They prepared the main island of Kyushu. But they forgot one thing. They forgot the stepping stone. Tsushima. Tsushima sits in the middle of the strait, 82 kilometers from the Korean coast. It is isolated. It is mountainous. It is a place of fishermen and farmers. It was the first thing the Mongols would see. And while the rest of Japan was building walls, Tsushima was left with 80 men and a 67-year-old commander. The storm wasn't coming. The storm was already there. 4 a.m. Komoda Beach. The darkness isn't just a lack of light anymore. It is a weight. The 80 samurai are mounted on their horses, their armor clinking softly in the cold air. They are waiting. They have lived their entire lives for this day. This is what it means to be a warrior in Japan. You train, you wait, and when the enemy comes, you meet them with your name and your blade. In the 13th century, Japanese warfare was like a dance. It had steps. It had rules. A samurai would ride out to the front of the line. He would pull back his bowstring and shout his lineage. I am the son of this man, grandson of that hero. I seek a worthy opponent. It was about individual skill. It was about honor. It was about being remembered in a song. The Mongols didn't have songs for you. As the first Mongol boats hit the sand, the samurai prepared for the duel. But what they saw wasn't individual warriors. They saw a wall of leather, wood, and iron. The Mongols didn't come out one by one. They came out in ranks, disciplined, cold, moving like a single, massive organism controlled by the beat of a drum and the clash of a gong. The samurai loosed their arrows. They were the best archers in the world. But then, something happened that they had never seen before. The Mongols raised shields. Actual, portable protective barriers. Think about that. In Japan, samurai didn't use handheld shields. They used fixed wooden walls on the battlefield. But as a warrior, you relied on your armor and your speed. To see an infantry line moving toward you behind a wall of shields was like seeing something from another planet. The Japanese arrows hit the wood and dropped. Then, the sky fell. The Mongols didn't pick targets. They didn't care who you were or who your father was. On a single command, thousands of arrows went up at once. A coordinated volley. The Japanese chronicles say the arrows fell heavy as rain. And it wasn't just wood and iron. Many of these arrows were tipped with poison. A scratch on your arm wasn't just a wound, it was a death sentence. Within hours, your blood would turn to fire. But the arrows weren't the worst part. Suddenly, a sound ripped through the air. A noise like 100 lightning strikes happening at once. A flash of blinding light. Iron balls, the size of a man's head, came flying from the Mongol lines. When they hit the ground, they didn't just break. They exploded. This was gunpowder, the thunder crash bombs. Imagine being a samurai in 1274. You have never heard an explosion in your life. You have never seen fire that moves faster than a horse. The sound doesn't just hurt your ears, it ruptures them. The smoke fills your lungs. But the worst part isn't what it does to the men, it's what it does to the horses. The samurai horses were bred for courage, but they were animals. They had never heard thunder coming from the ground. They panicked. They threw their riders. They ran into the woods, screaming. In seconds, the ordered battlefield became a slaughterhouse of smoke, blood, and invisible metal fragments. The Mongols weren't fighting a war. They were running a machine. One samurai, a man named Sukesada, refused to break. The records say he cut down 25 men in hand-to-hand combat. Imagine the strength that takes. Sword against spear, man against 20. He was a ghost in the smoke, a legend in the making. But legends don't stop 30,000 men. By the afternoon, the beach was no longer Japanese. It was a Mongol bridgehead. The 80 samurai were being pushed back into the trees, their traditions shattered, their horses gone, and their world ending in the smell of sulfur and burnt hair. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was an extermination with a schedule. The beach was lost. The sand was no longer gray. It was stained a deep, dark crimson. The smell of salt had been replaced by the metallic tang of blood and the acrid stench of sulfur. But Sō Sukekuni was still standing. He was 67, his armor was shredded, and his men were dying. But a samurai does not have a retreat button in his soul. In the Japanese code of Bushido, which was still being written in the blood of men like him, there is no shame in death. There is only shame in survival without honor. Sukekuni looked at the remnants of his force. They were exhausted. They were covered in the soot of Mongol bombs. Their horses were gone or trembling in the brush. Behind them, the villages of Tsushima were starting to glow. Not from the sunrise, but from fire. The Mongols had already begun to burn the homes of the innocent. They didn't wait for the battle to end to start the destruction. Night began to fall. Most commanders would have used the darkness to slip away into the mountains. They would have hidden in the dense forests, hoping to fight a guerrilla war. But Sukekuni knew that every minute he spent hiding was a minute a farmer's family was being dragged from their home. He made a choice that defines the difference between a soldier and a legend. He organized a final cavalry charge. Think about the visual. 80 men, or what was left of them, mounting their tired horses for the last time. In front of them was a wall of 30,000 soldiers. The Mongols had set up camp. Their fires stretched for miles. Their gongs were silent now, replaced by the low murmur of an army that knew it had already won. They were relaxed. They were waiting for morning to finish the job. Then came the hooves. Sukekuni and his 80 warriors didn't scream. They didn't shout. They rode into the teeth of the Mongol Empire with the silence of ghosts. They charged directly into the heart of the invasion force. It was a suicide mission, yes, but it was more than that. It was a statement. It was Japan telling Kublai Khan, "You can kill us, but you cannot own us." The fighting was frantic. In the flickering light of the campfires, swords met shields. The samurai used their tachi, the long, curved predecessors to the katana, to slice through leather armor. For a moment, there was chaos in the Mongol ranks. They hadn't expected 80 men to attack 30,000. But math is a cruel master. The Mongols recovered instantly. They didn't need to duel. They simply surrounded the tiny group. Arrows fired from point-blank range. Spears lunged from the shadows. One by one, the 80 fell. Sukekuni's sons died beside him. His retainers, men who had served him for decades, were cut down in the mud. Sukekuni himself was finally overwhelmed. A man who had protected these shores for his entire life breathed his last breath in the dirt of the beach he loved. By midnight, every single one of the 80 samurai was dead. The defense of Tsushima was over. The nightmare for the civilians, however, was just beginning. The Mongols didn't just want the island. They wanted to send a message to the rest of Japan. They wanted the shogunate in Kamakura to hear the screams from across the water. And what happened in the next 3 days would be so horrific that even centuries later, Japanese historians would struggle to find the words to describe it. The Mongol fleet pulled away from the smoking ruins of Tsushima, leaving behind an island that had become a graveyard. Their hulls were heavy with plunder, and their sides were lined with the living trophies of their victory. They looked toward the horizon, toward the main islands of Japan, expecting to find a nation trembling in fear. They were wrong. What Kublai Khan's generals didn't understand was the nature of the fire they had just lit. By slaughtering the 80 samurai on Komoda Beach, they hadn't just won a battle. They had created a martyr out of Sō Sukekuni. The story of the old man who stood against 30,000 didn't stay on the island. It traveled. It reached the shogunate in Kamakura. It reached the shrines in Kyoto. The silence of Japan was no longer the silence of a manless barbarian who didn't know how to reply to a letter. It was the silence of a warrior drawing his breath before a strike. The aftermath. The Mongols moved onto Iki Island, where they repeated the same horrors. They landed on the shores of Kyushu, where the real wall of Japanese defense finally met them. But the shock and awe of the gunpowder bombs and the massive shield walls was starting to wear off. The Japanese began to adapt. They stopped trying to duel. They started fighting with a desperation the Mongols had never seen in China or Persia. But then, the sea itself seemed to remember the 80 men of Tsushima. In both 1274 and 1281, massive storms, the kamikaze or divine wind, shattered the Mongol fleets. Thousands of ships were smashed against the rocks. The 30,000 soldiers who had come to correct Japan's silence were swallowed by the same cold gray water that had watched the samurai die. The legacy of the 80. Today, if you visit Tsushima, the wind still bites at Komoda Beach. There is a shrine there now, dedicated to Sō Sukekuni and his men. People come from all over Japan to bow where the 80 fell. Think about the weight of that. History usually remembers the winners. It remembers the empires that spanned 12 million square miles. It remembers the Khans who sat on golden thrones. But in the Korea Strait, the world remembers the losers. It remembers the 80 men who knew they couldn't win, but fought anyway. This is the reality of history. It isn't a video game where you have a respawn button. It isn't a Hollywood movie where the hero survives against all odds. It is the story of a 67-year-old man who looked at 900 ships and decided that his honor was worth more than his life. The Mongol Empire is gone. The dynasty of Kublai Khan is a footnote in textbooks. But the 80 samurai of Tsushima, their story is still being told. Because while an empire can conquer the land, it can never conquer the memory of men who refuse to bow. Next time you look at a map of the world, find that tiny speck of an island between Korea and Japan. Remember the fire. Remember the thunder crash bombs. And remember the 80 who stood in the way of the largest empire the world had ever seen. History isn't just dates and names. It is the blood in the sand. It is the scream in the wind. And it is the silence of those who chose to die on their feet rather than live on their knees. All sources for this account, from the Soshikafu to the archaeological findings of the 13th century bombshells, are documented. The truth is often more terrifying than fiction. If you enjoy dark untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.